The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC, Crown, Hotspot Auto Parts, and Sound Insurance. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined today by Jody Lai for the first time. She's the editor-in-chief at Auto Guide, and David Booth, who is a returning guest. He's with National Post. He's our motor mouth. I'm really glad to have you two here, both. Well, it's going to be interesting. Let's just say that.
It's going to be a good one. Thanks for having me.
We are going to talk about PHEVs, electrics, hybrids. This topic is changing every 10 minutes. That's why I wanted you two here, because you are on top of all this. Actually, all of us are driving these all the time as they're changing. David, I'm going to come to you first. We both drove the new Outlander. Mitsubishi put out this car. It's their best-selling vehicle at this time, and it's doing really well.
The last 2 months it is.
And you wrote a piece that really explains well why this is different than a lot of the stuff on the market. So can you just give me a couple minutes on this Outlander and why it's so special?
Well, the first thing is PHEV stands for plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So basically what a PHEV is a purely electric vehicle, like the Outlander that we're talking about, will go 35 kilometers on pure battery power alone. In other words, no emissions, no fuel consumption, nothing at all. After those 35 kilometers, approximately, are up, the gasoline engine kicks in and either powers the battery to power the electric motor, that's called series hybrid, or it works together with the electric motor to power the wheels. That's called parallel hybrid. The bottom line is for your city use, it's fantastic because it allows pure electric, non-gasoline use. And then when you go out on the highway, Bob's your uncle, you got the convenience of gasoline. Perfect solution.
Yeah, so what I like about PHEVs is that you kind of get the best of both worlds. So you don't have to deal with that range anxiety that everyone's always talking about, because if your battery runs out, you can run it on gasoline just like a normal car. So it really is the best of both worlds.
And we're seeing a lot of changes. The technology is moving really, really rapidly. And I think that can be really, it's confusing for consumers, because you're standing there going, do I get a pure electric? And there's 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, it's not the same car anymore. I know you.
I don't understand. I'll be honest with you. I don't understand our headlong rush into pure battery-powered electrics, because I had the PHEV, the Outlander again, for about 5 weeks. And while I was in the city, it was mostly electric. Once in a while, I'd go past the 35-kilometer range limit. And overall, in the city, I used 1.1 liters per 100 kilometers over 5 weeks.
Which is insanely
great. Even when I added in some highway use, where I averaged about 7 liters per 100 kilometers, which is still pretty good, my overall was 3 liters per 100 kilometers. You factor all of this in, and here's the numbers. If you drive a PHEV and you do the normal amount of city versus highway driving, you can reduce your gas consumption, and more importantly in these days, your carbon dioxide emissions, your greenhouse gas emissions, by 75%. Now, what's most important about how I achieved mine? I plugged it into my 110 volt line. I didn't get a 220 volt thing. When I went downtown, I never searched for a plug-in. In other words, I plugged it in at night in my regular 110 volt line, and the rest of the time I just drove it. In other words, there was no infrastructure change, no inconvenience to me whatsoever. There was no inconvenience when I did take it on the highway, just gas it up. If we can do that with no infrastructure change and no inconvenience to the driver and get 75% reduction of greenhouse gases, why are we doing all this infrastructure and expense for the last 25%? Nobody has explained this to me, and I really, really don't understand it.
I think because pure electrics is where the future is going, and I mean, I think every major manufacturer is going in that direction, and the PHEVs are just kind of like a bridge to get to that end.
But again, if we can do 75% without this future you're talking about, why bother with the last 25%? Certainly the environment, the planet, can't be relying on us getting all 100% of the emissions away from cars. If it is, we're already doomed.
Okay, but to Jody's point, we've got every manufacturer going there.
Yeah.
And they must be doing it for a reason.
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of this, I mean, you're presupposing that auto companies are smart. I've been in this business for 35 years, and I'll tell you, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen enough stupidity to not go, oh, well, if they're doing it, it must be right. No, I'm sorry. I don't buy that. The other thing is again, people don't remember that 6-7 years ago, it was head-to-head hydrogen versus electric.
Yeah.
And technologically, there were, how would I say, advantages and disadvantages to both.
Yeah.
It wasn't technologically the battery-powered went ahead and hydrogen fell behind. No, sirree, Bob. It was Elon Musk came along, and we have the cult of Tesla.
Well, it was also that in the infrastructure, nobody wanted to invest in hydrogen refueling. And so right now in Canada, there's like one place in the whole country where you can refuel your hydrogen car.
I think there's 3 now as of a few months ago or
Oh,
something.
okay.
Because I know Vancouver
Jody,
was it. and
I've done
Ottawa.
the numbers for the infrastructure. While you can do it incrementally with the EVs, you need 96 350 kilowatt charging stations, 96, to replace the 16 gas pumps at an en route station. They're about $100,000 a piece.
I've heard your math. We're going to do your math again when we come back in the next segment. We'll be back with more lemonade after this break. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC and Crown. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined by Jody Lai and David Booth, and we're having a blast, even though I haven't got a word in edgewise with the two of you, but that's totally just
Sorry.
fine. No, it's awesome.
I'm not sorry.
I know you're not sorry. We've gone head-to-head on the electric issue, David. I absolutely agree that hybrids are the bridge from here to that. Whatever there is, I don't know if electrics are, everyone's telling me that, so I'm reporting what I'm told. But I believe the hybrids are absolutely great and will do the job that everyone is wanting electrics to do. We've talked about, you think if everyone was an electric, gas stations would be backed up out the wahoo at the en routes.
On the en routes, it's going to be miserable.
And my argument, which you totally decided you didn't like or didn't agree with, was people have a charging station in their house. They don't have a gas station in their house. Yeah. If I'm at the cottage and I have an electric vehicle, I'm going to have a charging station at my cottage as well.
Right.
So I don't have a gas station at my cottage, so I'm not going to be at an en route in between those two places. I think the goalposts are going to move as the technology changes.
So I'm actually in between the both of you on this. So I rent a condo in downtown Toronto. I don't have access to a charger in my rented spot. And so for me, if I were to get a PHEV, I'd have to rely on places like those en routes to get my charging in.
All right.
So I don't have a garage like you guys. And so I'm kind of in the middle, but yeah, you were going to say?
I've talked to the charging infrastructure guys, and how will I say it? Lay people, especially the Tesla fans, yourself as well.
I don't like Tesla.
No, but you like electric cars. The point is that's your solution. The people that are building the charging infrastructures, they don't believe that for a whole
I'm actually
moment.
not an electric fan.
No,
when
but
I have them,
nobody's
so
going to
much
plan their life so precisely that they can go 400 kilometers exactly and never beyond for their road trips. You're going to need some station that somewhere between Toronto and Montreal, where a lot of people are going to drive between Toronto and Montreal and fill up. Just for instance, okay, here's just one more number for you. You replace all the 16 gas pumps at an en route with enough chargers to charge the same number of cars that come through there, say on a holiday Monday, Labor Day. Mm-hmm. That station is going to, for about 8 hours, draw 30 megawatts. That's big, isn't it? Do you want to know what 30 megawatts is? It's a town of 55 to 60,000 people. Can you imagine if every 80 kilometers you have an electrical output or input or whatever you want to call it of 30 megawatts, a town of 55 to 60,000 people growing up? Because you can't put those stations in there to only manage, Tuesday at noon on a regular work day, there's very few people. You got to manage for Christmas Day, New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Labor Day. Because if remember the oil crisis, and there was 3 cars lined up or 5 cars lined up. If there's a dozen electric vehicles lined up on a Labor Day, it'll be lucky that we don't have the number of guns that they have in the United States.
But devil's advocate, the technology's changing rapidly as well. It's going to take less time to fill them up. They're going to go further. Remember in Detroit a few years ago, they got to, I think, 100 kilometers on the range, and it was like, whoa, that's amazing. And then 400, 500, like it's going up. Yeah, I know you want to talk. You just got to wait a minute. But I mean, I admit, whenever I have an electric car, I spend more time at IKEA buying crap I don't need because I'm waiting for it to charge out front.
Yeah, and it's free, but a lot of charging
stations. I don't have a 220
yeah,
at home.
Exactly.
And my dishwasher blows up every time I plug the outlet in the garage.
I just had a conversation with the charging guys, literally with when I did the Jaguar I-Pace.
Yeah.
So just so everybody understands, range will increase, batteries will get better. No question.
Okay.
If we need more electricity, the large part of the grid, there's that argument, that's not going to be a problem either. The roadblock, again, is those pumps on the side of the road, those individual chargers, okay? What you've, and again, I'm sorry I'm using so many numbers, the biggest that anybody's going to be able to hold in their hand and put into a car, just like we do a gas pump, is 500 kilowatts. For your knowledge, that means a Tesla is going to take at least 12 minutes as opposed to about a gas car of 2 minutes to charge up, 6 times as long. That's the very best. You will never, ever hold on to it just because of physical limitations, anything bigger than a 500 kilowatt charger. So if you want to get down to the kind of charging everybody talks about, oh, well, eventually they'll be able to charge as well as quickly as a gas car, you're going to have something completely automated. Now, they are working on it. But you're talking a 1 or 2 megawatt charger that is fully automated. This is not going to be $5,000 or $10,000. Okay, so there's a huge roadblock. Again, these are the roadblocks I'm talking about. Yeah. And what I said to you before applies. These are all the roadblocks, and I'm going, okay, if we can get 75% of those greenhouse emissions, and we can avoid all of the pratfalls that I just talked about, why aim for that last 25%? Why not use that money for some other portion of the environmental message to try to be more productive? It's not cost-effective use of our money.
We're all actually agreeing. You'd never know. It sounds like we all actually agree. The hybrids are getting there. And I don't even think, we'll save it for the next segment, but pulling off the rebates, which is its whole own political thing. Yeah, you could make that noise, but no, it's something we have to talk about. So you know what? We're gonna go to break, then we're gonna come back. We'll be right back with more Lemonade. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC and Crown. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined by Jody Lai and David Booth. Jody, I have a question for you because David's done enough talking for the next 2 minutes. I want to go back to hybrids because we actually all agree that hybrids are a really good way to go. The government has pulled off the rebates, which were huge, and a lot of there was a lot of mixed emotions, shall we say, around those rebates. And I know some people say if you need a rebate that big, it means the product's a failure. Dennis DeRosier says that actually, so I get it. They pulled them off. Do you think this is going to stop the industry cold? Do you think people are going to stop buying hybrids or change the way they're looking at them? Because people that have them love them.
Right.
I think that's my experience.
I don't think this will affect it too much. I think they're already going so hard in that direction. It would not make sense just to stop right now if you're an automobile manufacturer. Also, if you look at something like Tesla, and I know you're rolling your eyes at me, but people want a Tesla regardless of whether or not they get the rebate. It's a status symbol. Yeah. And I think with a lot of electric cars going forward, people aren't going to care that much. Like if someone's going to spend $200,000 on a plug-in electric Porsche, do they care if they're going to get like $3,000 back? Not really.
Okay, so let's flip it back.
Actually, they do. Well, they do.
But what about, to me, this is more about the people who are looking at a hybrid Cruze or a hybrid, or, a Prius or something.
It doesn't matter. If you look at all the jurisdictions that actually have pulled their rebates,
they crash.
They crash big time. Like the PHEV, I think it was Netherlands, was doing like 800 units a month. They pulled the rebate. It went to 20. Georgia, the state of Georgia, pulled its rebate, and it just 90% reduction, 85% reduction. Mm-hmm. The one theoretical thing, what DeRosier said about not succeeding, is this: we need to remember that while Teslas are fairly new and everything else, hybrids and the electrified automobile has now been around for 18 years. If you can't succeed in 18 years without a subsidy, I think you need to go away.
Well, no, I don't agree with that either, just because the technology is getting so good right now. And the problem in those early years was that they just weren't being made enough.
Wasn't enough.
Yeah, the cost wouldn't be justified. And so I think at the progress we're moving now, if the technology gets that good where we can get the price of a hybrid equal to that of a non-hybrid,
Exactly.
it's almost a no-brainer to get the hybrid model.
They're closing the gap. You're
Yeah,
right.
and it's
I don't
getting
think-
smaller and
as
smaller.
long as they can do it out of subsidy. Think of another product, okay, that has been as hyped as electrified hybrids and everything else. I mean, the general media is just all over this. This is the future. Everybody's acknowledging this. You even said it. 18 years we've been told this is the future. Only positive news. Guys like me are off in a corner somewhere. 18 years of positive news, 18 years of subsidies, and they still need them? Again, if at some point, put it this way to you, if it's not today that we take off the subsidies, it's not quite ready, when? There has to be, is it 5 years, or are you going to say the same thing? Well, no, they still need a little bit of help. At some point in time, you're going to, if you have children, I certainly had, at some point in time I had to go, get out of the house, you're on your own.
I tried that. It didn't work at all. Boomerang right back in. But no, I think this is where we should separate electrics from hybrids in this conversation, because hybrid costs are coming down even as we're sitting here talking, and the gap used to be $10,000 on a $25,000 car. Like, and you're staring at them, they look identical. And you have no trunk space in the one with the battery. Batteries are smaller, charges are getting better. So it's down to a gap of maybe $5,000 or $6,000 now, and it's coming down. So that's, the subsidies.
It'll never be quite equal.
And I think there are other benefits too. I mean, you could use the HOV lanes. There are other benefits to having that without getting the subsidies, for sure.
And the environmental aspect is a big deal. If you've got those kids, you're caring, because the planet's basically a big toilet
I
now.
got a kid, and I care about the planet. I just want it done cost effectively. That's I mean.
And I think we have the best hope with hybrids of doing that, of moving from this to that.
More than battery powered electrics. I agree. And the one thing is, when people think of economies of scale, and they also think of progress, they think, well, everything like a hybrid eventually will be as cheap as a gas car. It'll get cheaper, even more than the $5,000 or $6,000 you said today. It may get down to $2,500, but remember, a regular car has a gasoline engine and a transmission. A hybrid has a gasoline engine, a transmission, possibly another transmission, an inverter, an electric motor, and a battery. So no matter how many you build of them or how efficient you are at building them, they will never be as cheap as the same car with just a gasoline powertrain.
I think eventually one day it'll get there.
I think so too. And the maintenance is different. I mean, brakes,
Yeah,
way
electric
less
cars
on brakes.
Overall cost, but you guys are talking about purchase price. I mean, one's got twice as many parts in the powertrain as the other. You can make 1 billion of them, it's still going to be a little more expensive.
Okay, we'll be back with more yelling after this break on the Lemonade Car Show. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC and Crown. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm with Jody and David Booth, and we're having a feisty conversation about plug-in hybrid electrics, normal cars, and nobody agrees on anything. So what's new? Okay, we're going to move this over a little bit. For consumers that are walking into a showroom or doing their research on these cars, is there anything, Jody, you would think on the hybrids they would have to keep in mind, or something that's better or worse than something they're anticipating?
The time is actually really good to buy a hybrid right now, despite the incentives being gone, especially if you're in the market for a used hybrid or plug-in. The depreciation on them is really, really massive. So if you're buying new, it might be something to keep in mind that it'll lose its value quicker than a non-hybrid version. But if you're shopping used, you get a great deal. So it's just something to keep in mind.
That's a good thought.
I'd say, people that are shopping hybrids, any kind of electric car have to know their intended driving fairly well. Like a plug-in hybrid, for instance, is really great if you got a whole bunch of short trips and then one really long trip. That's perfection for a plug-in hybrid. On the other hand, if you do 80 kilometers a day, every day, then a regular hybrid, sort of like a Prius, I would actually recommend in those circumstances a regular Prius over a plug-in Prius because of the cost differences and the longer daily mileage and stuff like that.
Do me a favor, talk about the difference between a regular Prius and a plug-in Prius.
Well, there's not, I mean, it's the same as virtually any car that has a regular hybrid and then a plug-in hybrid. What they basically do is put a much larger battery. The battery in a regular Prius is about 1.2 kilowatt hours. I don't remember what the plug-in Prius is, but I know the Outlander PHEV is 12 kilowatt hours. That's so we can go quite far on pure electricity. The basic hybrid is not meant to go 35 kilometers or anything close to that on pure electricity. So it's a much simpler device. Okay. There's less equipment, much less battery. And batteries, every kilowatt hour of battery is somewhere around $200 a kilowatt. So you got 10 extra kilowatts. There's $2,000. So that's right away part of the problem. But again, a plug-in one will go a certain distance on pure electricity. A regular hybrid might get to 20 kilometers an hour on pure electricity, and the rest of the time it's combining both electricity and gasoline. That's the difference.
Now, a lot of them you see the little brake as you're braking, you're regenerating, but not all of them.
All of them, all electrics.
Most of them do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say all
even
of them.
hybrids.
Okay, that's why I'm asking, because I'm getting all fuddled up here and I get confused. That's why I do this show. I get to ask as well. Okay, so as you're braking, you're regenerating.
Mm-hmm. And some of them even have more active systems that are like in the paddle shifters. So instead of actually using the brake pedal, you could just activate the brakes with the paddles to do the regen.
The PHEV Outlander uses the paddles not to brake, but to determine how much brake force you can get out electrically. And all that is happening with regen is they've got an electric motor, they're just flipping the leads so that when you apply the brake, instead of the electric motor driving the car, it's slowing the car and pumping electricity back into the brakes. That's all that's happening.
So you just get more range that way. It's just another one of those smart things.
5%, 10%. It's not the.
It helps a little bit.
It helps a little. There's people that really believe, I can get 50% of my range back just on regen braking.
It's the new hypermiling.
No,
we're not going to talk about it. I went across the country hypermiling. It's brutal.
It'll be slow but fun.
Yeah, no, it was brutal. The technology on these cars is spectacular. I don't think consumers realize what's under the hood. It's like we pan them and we say, it's a pain in the butt, you can't make it this far, you can't do this, but the tech has come so far in such a short time. I think it's remarkable what companies are doing.
Yeah, I think it's super cool because there are so many electric cars and PHEVs now that they just operate like regular cars. And so even if you weren't like a really green flag bearer, like you're not the granola munchers that you used to talk about, and you just want a regular car that drives like a regular car, but you don't want your footprint to be that big, it's a really easy switch over to make.
Perfect. The last minute's yours. We have a minute.
In fact, it segues right into what I was going to finish with, which is that the amazing thing, I really like the Outlander PHEV. It really suited my thing. It's an SUV that gets great gas mileage. But the amazing thing is it's just the beginning. Let's remember, unlike many current hybrids and all battery electric cars, it wasn't designed as a plug-in hybrid. It's the regular old SUV Outlander with stuff added to it. So it's not purpose-built that way. In other words, they found a way to fit as much battery into it as they could without changing anything. Mm-hmm. When they designed the next one, it's going to not just get 35 kilometers of range, it's going to get 80 kilometers of range or something like that. In other words, you will never, even myself who drives a lot in the city, you will never use any electricity or gasoline in the city at all, making it even more efficient. Plus, your first 80 kilometers of your 300-kilometer trip are electric as well, so that it'll cut. I would say it would cut fuel consumption, instead of the 70 to 75% I saw, closer to 80 to 85% when they do it right. And I'll get back to my question again. If I can cut 85% of my greenhouse gases, why do I care about electric cars?
We've come full loop. Thank you to Jody Lai, David Booth, our sponsors, Omvik, Crown, Hotspot Auto Parts, and Sound Insurance. That's all for Lemonade today. And thanks to you viewers.